Hey, everybody, welcome to another Sunday morning conversation. Today, my guest is Linda Fox, and she is a visually impaired guide for triathletes. She just completed Texas 70.3, and we talk a little bit about it and being a VI guide. So, thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm not too bad. So
Good.
you did Galveston. Are you still tired from it?
No, I think I was mostly back up to par by like the following Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, the so tell me how being a VI guide works, because I do have visual impairments, but I don't need a guide. And I
Uh-huh.
always thought it'd be something to need to do for somebody else, you know?
So how do I say it? So like, it's very black and white to an extent on, so like, if you can't get through the course by yourself, then you have to have a guide. So Letty, for example, is unable to get through the whole course by herself. So she has to have a guide. However, if you have impairments that, how do I say it? That like if you can get through the course mostly by yourself, then you would be considered special teams. So like I'm actually going to go to Tulsa with my friend and we're going to special teams with one of our friend Trent. So he can get through the whole course by himself. He just kind of needs to be closely watched. So like if you can get through the course yourself, but maybe you kind of need a buddy, then you would go in as special teams.
I've never heard of that before. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I just learned about special teams probably a year or two ago. So it's different. So like because I'm a guide for a visually impaired athlete, I have to be tethered to her. So like when we swim, we have to be tethered. When we cycle, I have to ride a tandem with her, and when we run, I have to be tethered with her. But if you are special teams, there's not necessarily that requirement of being tethered.
So kind of like how that Chris Nikic did it. He was and then he wasn't. It didn't have to be, but he didn't really need it.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Now, I mean, do you take the tether off when you ride the tandem bike and then relink
Yes.
it again?
Yeah, so like we actually have two separate tethers. So one of them we wear when we swim, and then when I get into transition one, I like take it off, and then we hop onto the tandem together. And then when after we re-rack the tandem, then we'll put on a whole nother set of tethers.
Okay, that sounds like a lot of work. It explains why your transitions for VI people are always so slow, because there's so much for them to do.
Right. So, well, first of all, trying to rack the tandem is a little skillful because me and Letty, neither one of us are actually strong enough to rack the tandem ourselves. So we have to work together to do it. So there goes time right there. And we also, like, I can't run her through transition the same way that I would run through transition as well. So we just move a whole lot slower. And then, like, I can see when I'm transitioning, I see where my helmet is, I see where my shoes are, I see my nutrition, so I can do it. Whereas Letty can't do that. So she kind of has to feel around to figure out like where her stuff is. So like I have to set transition out for her, but I do it in such a way that like she knows that if she puts her hands to the left, all of her stuff will be there. Her helmet will be there. All those loose items like her, snacks or nutrition or whatever, her cochlear implant, for example, will all be inside her helmet such that she'll grab her helmet, take that stuff out, eat it, put her cochlear on, slap on her helmet, put her sunglasses on, and then right underneath that will be like her shoes, for example. So like it's just like I can get myself dressed, but remember, we're two people. We're getting two people through transition, so that's why it takes us so much longer. And then once we unrack, we're also still not running out, like we're slowly walking through. And then it takes a little bit more work for us to get our bike situated and get it clipped in because it's going to take the two of us. I have to rely on her to create the momentum or we're just not going to get up and going.
How did you get that bike there? Like these are specialty bikes. Where did it, like, Challenge Athlete Foundation donated for you or something? Or how, like this is fit in
So
a travel case well?
so there's some organizations like CAF, for example, Catapult, Dare to Try, Paraguide. They have the ability. They own tandem bikes. Sometimes they'll rent them out to athletes that are like, "Hey, I'm flying in to such and such place for a race. Can y'all help me like rent a bike?" There's also a place called House of Tandem. You can rent bikes or rent tandems for that. Some athletes will own their own. So Letty has actually purchased her own. It's a used bike, but she lives in College Station, so they literally just drove it over. There are some athletes that like you can sort of disassemble the bike and put them into 2 bike boxes and, fly with them. But, Letty doesn't have one of those bikes. So her husband will just drive it over.
Well, that is very nice of him.
Yeah.
I don't know if my ex-man did that for me. No, I'm not going back. So what had drawn you to being a VI guide? What,
It was actually kind of a really strange turn event. So like there's a very known bilateral below knee amputee. His name is Patrick Pressgrove, and he's kind of the face of Catapult. So Catapult is the nonprofit organization that we have here in Houston, and they pair up PC athletes with guides for the marathon, triathlon, you name it, they're doing it. So I knew who Patrick was for a very long time. I just had never formally met him, and coincidentally I literally just talked about this yesterday. So I actually lost my job, and I knew that Patrick was in the same industry as me, and I was like, hey Patrick, do you happen to have any leads on jobs? And he's like, yeah, I'll look into it. He's like, oh, hey, by the way, since you have some time on your hands, why don't you come out to like a Catapult practice? And I'm like, okay, like I don't know anything about it. And so I kind of got thrown into guiding, and like it clicked very quickly for me. I was like, oh, like this, I understand that I can just go outside and run by myself and I've got no problems. Whereas someone who's VI, they can't necessarily do that. And so I spent a year trying to guide a race, and for whatever reason they never quite picked me up. And then when the pandemic hit, a race suddenly went live, and I knew that Letty lives in College Station, so I messaged her and I was like, hey Letty, there's a race that's going live and it's in College Station where you live. I was like, I'll come out and guide you, but I've never guided before. And it just very quickly blossomed from there. I would say that it made it an easier thing for me to get involved in because I was building a really good relationship with Letty. I think that if I had maybe a different athlete, it might not have bloomed into what it was, because there's some athletes that are like, they're a little bit more stubborn, a little bit more difficult to work with. But like it was so easy for me to just grow into it with Letty.
Yeah, sorry. I saw the pictures from Scott Flathouse that used to seem to bond pretty well. I don't know if that necessarily happens with somebody who's blind and it tends to be on the funnier side, but that's what I found with people that are VI. They kind of self-deprecating humor.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would have to say that VIs are probably the funniest people I've ever met. Most of the time, anyway. Every once in a while, you've got some that are they're a little more to the point on some stuff, which is fine. So like I'll admit I've some of our practice runs that we've done, some of them don't want to talk nearly as much. Some of them don't want to joke around. Some of them are all about, I got to beat so-and-so. And I'm like, you can't even see them, things like that. But yeah, I was very fortunate that Letty and I bonded super well. I would say it's very similar to like finding your soulmate, for example, where it's like, you happen to be on like the same wavelength. You understand, the concerns that you have for each other. You understand, that there's times where it's frustrating, but you're not exactly mad at each other. Or there's things where it's like, okay, I'll do whatever it takes to get to the finish kind of thing. So somewhere in the middle of Galveston run, Letty now owes me 2 buckets of ice cream.
Okay. How did that happen?
So I really like ice cream. And so the joke is that they'll always like feed me, and they know that I like ice cream. So they're like, okay, whatever you want, we'll feed you some ice cream.
I can't complain with that there. Vanilla is a very complex flavor. It's a very underrated.
Yeah, it was, I qualified for age group nationals in August, and I told Letty, like, as much as I enjoy guiding her, I was like, this summer, I need to focus on, my races. So Galveston was kind of our last hurrah for me to, before I'm taking some time to step back. But like I told her, I was like, Letty, if there's races you want to do, great. Like, I'm more than happy to guide you. I just can't be guiding as frequently as I'm doing my own races. So, but yeah, it was, when she asked me to guide her for Galveston, there was no question about it. Like I'm there. Whereas every once in a while we'll have a race and I'm like, I'm not sure that's the best race for you to do. Or like maybe that race is not exactly PC friendly, like it's going to be kind of a struggle kind of thing. Or our very first one that we did, the swim was in the ocean. And I was like, Letty, we're not going to do that again. Like that's a little bit beyond your skill level. And I was like, that becomes very dangerous because, if we get thrown down in the water, and something happens, I now have to take care of the two of us in the water. Whereas if I'm doing it by myself, I can take care of me. So there's stuff that like, it was a little hard to have to admit to her, but I was like, Letty, there's some stuff that like, as much as I want you to do it, like I have to tell you, no, like that's not your best, that's not in your best interest.
Well, that's cool. I mean, anything that's not flat is definitely not in your interest because it's just going to wear you down. Like,
Sure. I mean, some elevation changes are not that difficult because we can work together. But like, if it's like a 4,000 foot elevation change on the bike, like probably not the best.
I could never imagine doing 2 people climbing that 4,000 feet.
Exactly. That's why I was like, I don't want to think about that right now.
So how often do you plan on being her guide again? Just whenever she asks, and if it's your schedule?
Yeah, basically. There are times. So like, she's gonna do a tandem time trial next week, I think it is. And she asked if I can do it, and I told her, I was like, I'm busy. So she was able to find another guide, but I also told her, I was like, the guide that she did find, I was like, they're going to handle that tandem way better than I can. So like, there's guides that are far more experienced than I am. And so like, I try and tell her, you should go ride with them and go learn some stuff from them. Cause like, I don't know everything. Like I'm still new. I'm only 1 year in. But yeah, I told her, I was like, hey, as long as I'm available, like I'm there. But she also understands that there's going to be times that I won't be available. She's got to find another guide.
Yeah, that's got to be hard because you don't live in the same city, so you're coming from different locations.
Right. Well, fortunately, College Station is only like an hour and a half away. So like they come here very often. Every once in a while, I'll go over there. But then there's Cheyenne that lives in Dallas, and every once in a while they'll get together too. Cheyenne's a lot more experienced than I am as well. She actually raced Galveston solo for the first time. So yeah, there's other people that like they're more than happy to kind of help and chip in. And at the same time, there's new guides that like they need the experience. So we're always like, hey, Letty, you want to come out and ride with someone so that they can try it for the first time?
You know what? I tell you, I joined a Facebook group for VI people just to see if I can be a guide just for road races.
Yeah.
The demand is like almost non-existent. They're like, it's like being a dude at Georgia Tech. There's just so many other dudes out there, and you're not seeing any chicks. And
yeah, I would say that there's a massive lack of female pilots, is what I have heard.
So it's like, there's actually not a lot of opportunities to be a VI guide. And I kept my eyes open in this Facebook group for like 4 years, and nothing like came up within 4.5 hours of here. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, I would say trying to get involved with some organizations also help. Like Achilles, for example. Like if you get your foot in the door with like Achilles or Dare to Try and stuff, and they know that you're an active guide, then I think that might also help. Don't get me wrong, some of those Facebook groups are good too, but I was like, I feel like you have to have more a direct connection with people. So like once I got involved with Catapult, I suddenly had a lot more open doors. And my buddy Nelson also guides. And so just kind of within our internal network, we were able to like get a lot of VIs together with guides. But yeah, it's definitely not an easy thing to get done.
What is Catapult exactly? I mean, is it just like a triathlon club?
No, so Catapult is a nonprofit organization, and they're the ones that they've got a grant program, for example, and the application's open today. And it's things like, as simple as, hey, they have their Saturday morning practice and Wednesday evening practice. And it's like, hey, we've got, 6 VIs coming out for practice. Can we get guides to come out? So it's as simple as getting guides paired up with the athletes, but it's also, the Chevron Marathon, for example, we had 2 guides per every one VI athlete and every one guide to every hand cycle, and it's things like that. Like they'll start pulling guides to pair things up like that. But it's also like they've got their big fundraiser that happens in the beginning of the year, and it's like, you know, they accumulate $200,000 or whatever, and it's things like
That's what I'm talking about.
athletes that like they can, yeah, if they can't hold a job, for example, like Catapult will, you know, give them money and they're able to pay for an entry. Or it's things like you know, help providing a running blade for an athlete, or help you know, get a tandem for an athlete, or it's, you know, help them get a metro pass to like get from practice to practice, or, you know, get them a treadmill, for example. So it's like the money that always gets accumulated always goes back to the athletes in one way or another.
Well, that's good, because it doesn't really do that with the professionals in our sports.
Right, yeah.
The professionals have to keep fighting for it.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, don't get me wrong, they still have to fill out an application, and basically it's, you know, why are you more deserving of this money than, you know, say someone else. And some of it is as simple as like some of these athletes, like maybe they're not necessarily an active athlete, so it's like, you know, like, why do we want to give you the money when, you know, we have another athlete that's, you know, signing up for races all the time, or maybe they're a little bit more in need, you know, things like that. So even though they apply for a grant, not all of the athletes will receive a grant.
How much do the grants usually go for? Is it a varying amount?
I think it varies. I honestly don't know. I never asked
I mean,
Letty.
I know what a
But I
tandem
do
bike
know,
costs.
huh?
I know what a tandem bike costs.
I as well know what a tandem bike costs. But so like some of the stuff she'll still pay out of pocket. So I think Letty mostly uses her money to pay for like coaching, for example, and her race entries. Because like she still like her husband makes money, for example. Whereas there's some athletes that like they're not married, their family doesn't exactly help them out. So some of that I'm sure they use that money a little bit differently.
Yeah, I'm one of those people actually. I was engaged, now I'm single after my brain injury. So now
Right.
I'm just an athlete.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's definitely different being one of those people. You never think your life is going to be like that at the age of 32. So,
Right. Yeah.
and I'm sure a lot of the people, well, you know, that you've been guides for don't think the same thing too.
Right. So like you run across people who have all kinds of stories. So like Letty's been, you know, short legged since the beginning, right? So she's got Usher syndrome. And so it was inevitable that she was going to become blind and deaf. Whereas some of your mobility impaired, for example, there was something tragic that happened and all of a sudden they, you know, are down a limb, for example. Some of them are born missing a limb. Some of them go blind along the way. Some of them had been blind for a really long time. So like there's a lot of them that vary, you know, differently from where they are. And that's actually one thing I learned when I went to Catapult Camp October 2019. That's kind of how I got involved. I think there was really only one person that like, so I learned how to better approach some of the athletes, right? So like Letty, for example, she's super chill. She's, you know, she's had this situation for a really long time, where some of them, they just had the traumatic event a year or two ago and they're not okay with where they are. So it's like, you know, you just have to kind of approach it gently on like how to talk to them about it. And sometimes it's like they're just, how do I say it, they're in a sense they still hate the world, and it's like, okay, I understand that. You know, I'm still, you know, I'm here to help you if you need or want help, but I'm also going to leave you be because I don't want to, you know, make you feel any worse than you already do. So like I still walked away with some really cool friends along the way. Some of them that are still maybe not quite there yet, and some of them that they're learning to be okay with, you know, their situations.
You know, I've definitely found that I've had to adapt to everything. I'm essentially living in a world that wasn't made for me. So to get around with my daily
Right.
life, I have to find ways to do things that other people could do on a normal basis.
Right.
But I mean, it's definitely different because, like, after my brain injury, I realized this place wasn't made for me anymore. Like, you know, the 1990 ADA Act and all, but man, it doesn't really do a whole lot for a brain injury.
Right. Yeah. Like I have a friend, she had some kind of, I don't know, TBI or something. I'm not sure what it is. So she mostly functions just fine, but there's always that hint that she could have a seizure unannounced kind of thing. So yeah, we always have to approach it differently.
I haven't had any seizures, thank God, because, you know, I would never be able to drive at this rate.
Right.
They don't want me driving as it is, so it is what it is. So when do you have? What's the next place you have raced? What is the next race you have planned for you and Letty? Is it going to be small, another 70.3, something like that?
I think she's looking at stuff towards the end of the year per my request. I'm trying to encourage her to go pick up another guide, but I think she's just so attached to me right now that she doesn't really want to find a new guide unless she like really, really has to.
You mix
So
and
she's
match
already talked
men
about
and
one
women
from
with
that's
guides?
really, huh?
You mix and match men and women with guides, or no?
Yes and no. So for like, if it's not a qualifying national event, then you don't have to be the same gender. But if you are going into some kind of USAT qualifying event, then you do have to be the same gender. So it almost comes out perfect because me and Letty are the same gender. But every once in a while, I encourage her. I'm like, you know what? If your husband wants to guide you, go like do it. You should do it. But it's mostly triathlon. In running, it doesn't really matter, but in triathlons, it does in fact matter.
I mean, if she wants a guide, just tell her I'll do it. I have like a lot of sky miles where I come on my card where I can just fly to anywhere in the U.S. because I live in Atlanta as a Delta hub. So,
Oh yeah, okay. Then you're not that far away. Okay, cool. Yeah. I try and encourage her to do it, but in her mind, I'm always going to be her top pick. And I understand that, but I'm trying to drill into her. I'm like, Letty, there's going to be a time that like I won't be able to do this anymore. So I'm trying to get her to think about other guides. She's actually going to go to a camp that I won't be able to go to in Chicago, and she doesn't have a guide lineup. So she's going to use one of the guides that's there. So I'm really, really hoping that she'll, get to learn with someone else, and maybe she'll take away some knowledgeable things that, I don't know anything about.
it makes me remind of the scene, a little scene from when you send your kids to school and with their lunch and everything. You said like, now learn something today, please.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we try and go to camps as often as we can, just because, I'm sure the coach has something to teach us that some other coach, might not have to offer, some, stuff like that. So,
So how did this all? I mean, how did you and Letty meet? I guess that's the last question I had to ask you. You seem.
so I went to Catapult camp. I think it was October 2019. And I came on as a volunteer. Like I was so new to Catapult. I'd only been sort of involved with Catapult for about a year. And so I was like, I'm not sure guiding is really my thing, but I want to be involved, right? So I came on as a volunteer. And my friend Gilly was actually assigned as Letty's guide. So Gilly learned that weekend how to guide a triathlon, which by the way is not an easy task in one weekend. But Gilly also she brought work. She had to work. So at one point she goes, I have to go back to the cabin to do work. Do you mind walking Letty back to the cabin? I'm like, sure. Like it was 2 bunk like rooms that shared a bathroom. So like we were kind of in the same area. I knew who Letty was, but like I didn't know very much about her. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, I'm meeting Letty. I'm learning a little bit about her. And that was it. Like we walked away from camp and I was like, okay, that's Letty. I met Letty. And that was it. Like we weren't super close or anything until I reached out and was like, hey, there's this race. Do you want me to guide you? And then it escalated very, very quickly. And I would honestly say that they've kind of absorbed me into their family. So like there are virtually no secrets. I mean, we're talking about all kinds of stuff like lube and farts and poop and everything you can ever think about in a triathlon. But like I've learned when is the best time to tell her and when it's not the best time to tell her. So there could be times where I'm like really frustrated in the middle of a race, but I'm not going to tell her that. I won't tell her until after the race. I'm like, hey, I want you to know, because I'm not up for keeping secrets, but I want you to know like this was hard or this was difficult, or I think you could have done better here, or, I think you didn't push yourself hard enough, or, I like, all kinds of things I told her, because I think it's important for her to know that even though she's not noticing it at a race, I'm gonna tell her afterwards. I'll be like, hey, all these people came up to you and they wanted to tell you that you were an inspiration, but I couldn't tell you every single time it happened, but I told you after, or like our very first triathlon, I told her, I was like, Letty, I really didn't want to do that swim, but you said you wanted to do it. So we did it. And I was like, I didn't want to do that swim at all. So
Has she ever asked you to do a full distance race yet?
No, we've only done sprints. She wants to do an Olympic distance, but her swimming is not strong enough. So she now knows about relays. So she's thinking about asking me to relay with her sometimes. So I'll do the swim and then I'll pass her off to someone else to do the bike and run. We haven't quite figured it out yet. It's just she's trying to be considerate of me having my races, and so she doesn't want to overload me.
Well, I don't know if she realizes it or not, but it's still overloading you because you're adding someone else into a schedule. You're not adding.
Right. So that's why I think the compromise right now is that she'll ask me to come swim and then she'll take over the rest with another guide, which is fine because swimming is really, really easy. But I did have to tell her, I was like, Letty, having to bring you along through Galveston, I think I was just about as sore as doing a full Ironman by myself. Like it was very exhausting. And I told her, I was like, after this race is over, I was like, do not talk to me. Do not ask me to do anything for like at least a week. I was like, please don't. So
you just pretty much towed her in with your tether, right?
basically, yeah, like
I've heard that
was
happen
so
before.
excited to like hand her off to her husband afterwards. And I'm like, I'm literally gonna go stand over there and collapse on the floor. Like I was just that spent.
Yeah, I've seen it happen. So
Yeah, it's exhausting for sure.
at least it's only once or twice a year, though.
Yeah, so the smaller races are not that bad. Like I can get through the smaller races, but it's things that like, I mean, I still cycled 56 miles in 3.5 hours, and then we still ran for 3.5 hours. So like it's still a very, very long day. But if it's only, 2 hours, that's one thing. But 7 hours, that's exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, tell me about it. I got slower these days. I'm like, why am I here right now?
Yeah, for sure. But I would say Letty was in really good spirits at Galveston. I did check on her a lot. So when we registered, she hadn't quite been able to get those miles in yet. She worked very hard to go from like 20 miles to 50 miles on her bike. Like she had never gone that far before. And I told her, I was like, Letty, after 3.5 hours, like I'm in no man's land. I don't know what you can do because she's only cycled 50 miles in 3.5 hours and then ran a 5K. So I'm like, literally after that, I don't know what's going to happen. So I told her, I was like, I'm going to be as gentle with you as possible. And I asked her constantly, I was like, is anything hurting? She said, no, she's just sore. I was like, good. Because I was like, if there's something that's not right, I need to know because then I have to evaluate the situation differently. But fortunately, she was only just sore because she's never gone that far. I was like, okay, good. So there's like, she ran the marathon in January with COVID. Like, okay.
Wow, she's a trooper.
Yeah. So yeah, we're trying to teach her that I don't care what it is, but if something's wrong, you need to stop or whatever. Like I need you to tell me because if she stops and I don't stop, I'm still attached. So it's a rude awakening to have your hip jerked back. So I was like, I don't care what it is. I told her, I was like, I'm not gonna be mad if you stop, sooner than we're supposed to. I'm gonna be mad that you didn't tell me you needed to stop. So she was always like squeezing my hand or like trying to smack me or like she'd be like, oh my gosh. I'm like, okay, cool, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Like that doesn't bother me. It's when you like stop and don't tell me and I'm just boom, run off without her.
That sounds like it's a lot of work,
Oh yeah,
but it's definitely
it's
rewarding.
it's definitely rewarding, but it's equally draining. And I tell Letty all the time, like it's not easy, Letty, like, and she's aware of it, she understands it, but I think there's a lot of people that from the outside don't recognize the other work that goes into it. I just talked about this yesterday. It's like you show up on race day and that's what people see. That's great. That's awesome. But no one ever sees the blood, sweat, and tears, for the months leading into that. And I'll tell you for a fact, I went to a camp with Letty and we fell off that tandem probably 6 times. Like we just, whatever, we couldn't get started well enough. And we just kept falling off the tandem to the point that I got so frustrated. I literally walked away and sat in the middle of the parking lot and cried because it was frustrating. And a lot of people, they don't see that because they just see us on race day and it's like, hey, look, there's a tandem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, hey, it's been good with you joining me today. I appreciated it.
Yeah, of course.
Best of luck, and I might see you if I come race in Texas. I was supposed to do 70.3, but I couldn't, so injured.
Yeah. Yeah, you're always welcome down here. If you happen to be racing Waco in October, I'll be there. I'm not sure if I'm racing, but I have friends that are there, so I will at the very least be there to cheer. I don't know if I'll be racing as well.
It's the same thing with us in Chattanooga. It's 2 hours away, or Augusta, so you just
Yeah.
go out there and party for the day.
Yeah.
So, thanks again, Linda.
Of course.